Parliament also is vested with the power of making laws. So it is up to Parliament to bring in the laws of procurement, corruption, all that.
At what stage, even within the country, you recover the money? There has to be a criminal prosecution. There has to be an accused. After the conviction of the accused, then only you will start the process of recovering the money.
So it's high time that we have a good campaign finance regulated law.
Welcome to another episode of our interview series, Shared Values, partnering with the Reshape Europe. And in this series, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom Sri Lanka office, in partnership with EconomyNext and electoral magazine, are looking at shared values between the European Union and Sri Lanka. And how can we build on these shared values to create economic prosperity for our country? And today, we are examining a very area of much interest in the current environment, which is combating corruption to generate economic growth. Joining me is a very, very eminent panel. I'm delighted to welcome all three of you. I'm going to start off with my very good old friend, Rajeev Amarasuriya, former Secretary of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Welcome, Rajeev.
Good to be here.
Mr. Sarath Jayamanne is the former Director General of the Bribery Commission. Welcome, Mr. Jayamanne. And last but not least, Nadishani Perera, who is the Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka. Welcome, Nadishani. I'm going to start with you, actually, Nadishani. Look, in any national initiative, I think leadership from the top is critical, right? To set the tone, to inspire people to get on, to achieve their goals as well. Even in the case of winning, the war, there was leadership from the top. When it comes to combating corruption, I think there's a widespread belief in society that the top is the most corrupt. So then, who do we look for leadership in this initiative?
Thank you. So that's a good question, a current dilemma. I think, in a sense, what the recent happenings also demonstrated that all can be leaders. We all are citizens, youth, mothers, fathers, because, and those whom we now refer to as being on the top, were elected by us. This nation and our constitution lays the sovereignty on the people, and it is we who have chosen our representatives and given them all this power to serve us or serve the nation. And at a time when people felt that those powers that have been vested are not used for such purpose, but for certain personal gains, that's when they rebel against such. And I think that itself is an example of taking leadership where the citizens are calling for accountability. And I think that demand will have to continue, and it has to be picked up, and like we saw, by all groups in society, influential groups, and by all sectors. If you look at the private sector, key stakeholder, if you look at professionals in the country, various groups and religious leaders, and then of course the citizens' youth. And even if you look at corruption, it's basically it is the misuse of entrusted power for personal gain. So people felt that has happened. But at the end, corruption does not happen through just one party. It is always a network.
Ecosystem.
It's
yes.
Exactly, feeds upon one another. And so we need these other actors also to start saying no to corruption. Now, which institution have we said that we are going to have a zero tolerance policy with corruption? We at least have little tolerance, like part of our culture.
Absolutely.
Right? And so, it's fine while trying to influence the top and being very clear about the demand that whoever who is now replacing needs to have as minimum criteria that you have to have a clean track record. You should have demonstrated something to the effect that you have a commitment to uphold transparency and accountability. And you need to be transparent about what action you are taking at this critical juncture, because it's the lives of the people now. And after that, wherever you are, the public officials and public institutions needs to take the leadership. Now, they are leaders in their own institution. The professional bodies, private sector organization, from the top layer, those leaders need to now change things, be the change that you are demanding the politicians to be. And if you say no to corruption, if you say hereafter no more enabling of such corruption, then it's difficult for the top people to continue it. Absolutely. So that I think so your answer is yes, we all have to play that critical role at this point.
Absolutely, and I think we're going to discuss that a little bit further down this conversation as well. But I want to come to you, Rajeev, because I think one of the things that got revealed in the last few months, as well as we headed towards economic crisis, but something we, all of us knew beforehand, was that the large part of corruption seemed to center around state-owned entities and public finance, and who controlled it, and what are the lack of safeguards and so on. So I think Parliament was always entrusted with public fund. That's what something that people always seem to forget. It's Parliament's responsibility in terms of public finance, and I think it's time for Parliament to take back control. So how do we go about doing this? Where the executive seems to have overridden Parliament for a long time.
Yes, as you rightly said, the Imran, public finance is vested with Parliament, and there is no second thought about that. Parliament also is vested with the power of making laws. So it is up to Parliament to bring in the laws of procurement, corruption, all that. So, and we have had those laws. It's not a matter that we have the laws, we have the Auditor General, we have commissions, we have everything is there. COP is looking at things, but it is not happening in the way it should. I think we need to think out of the box. Because this is going on and on. Parliament can promulgate laws after laws, but if it's not being implemented in an effective way, and enforced in an effective way, then, and of course you find loopholes to get out of it, it's not going to work. So one thing is, of course, I think governments, especially in Sri Lanka, we are a welfare state, but we don't have a perfect government. We don't have a professional government.
Absolutely.
So we need to offload this state-owned enterprises as much as possible. Because one is, of course, you don't have the dynamics. You and I did SEMA. You know that running a business, you need to have dynamic. You have to make decisions on the move. The administrative structure does not permit you to do those.
Exactly.
If you were to make a quick decision tomorrow, you'll have to go through in the government sector. You'll have to spend a month doing that. So you can't be competitive. So in those circumstances, you need to offload the state-owned enterprises. You must keep you have to keep the departments and ministries. Those can be supervised by the Auditor General. We need stronger procurement laws, because all those departments, ministries, the corruption takes place when you procure the tenders. So you need to have stronger laws, but also you need to have laws which you can deal with different situations. Because sometimes it's not straightforward. And as soon as the process gets complicated, the law doesn't fit in, and then you have room for whatever. And people have been doing this. So we need to, if you are going to come out of this, my personal view is think out of the box. Think of ways and means of actually achieving your target. Because you and I speaking about this for the next 20, 30 years, which is the remaining life we have as professionals. We won't see a change.
Absolutely.
So I think if we work on those lines, take the essential things of government, focus on what laws you want to strengthen, and move out everything else. Take Lanka Milk Foods. All those companies were state-owned companies which are hugely profitable outside. So give it over, get the right price, and then focus back. So that I would think that is the way forward.
And I think we can come back to discussing exactly which areas we need to focus on in terms of implementation. But Mr. Jayamanne, there's one question that there's a major clamor in society today, and that is to recover stolen assets. The process is not as easy as people would like to think, and it's a long process. But we need to get started. So how do we empower the officials to go ahead and start this process and also give them the confidence to see it through?
What do you mean by recovery of stolen assets? That means due to various activities of the public servants, when the offense of corruption is involved, finally certain amount of money that belong to the government of Sri Lanka might be siphoned off to other countries. When those monies are sent to other countries, how, as a government of Sri Lanka, to recover that money? First of all, government of Sri Lanka or the courts generally would have jurisdiction only within the country. They don't have the jurisdiction to go to another country and recover the money. Now, generally, at what stage, even within the country, you recover the money. There has to be a criminal prosecution. There has to be an accused. After the conviction of the accused, then only you will start the process of recovering the money. But in other countries, they know this is a very difficult task because you have to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. But in other countries, they have invented a method called non-conviction based recovery, confiscation. What does it happen? There, you go after the property. You don't go after the perpetrator. For example, if in another country, if you are in possession of a flashy car, then the investigators can ask from where you have got this money.
And I think in the UK there's this new act of where you have to disclose, particularly if you're a foreign person, where you have the funds to buy real estate. And there have been a recovery of real estate even without a successful prosecution. So
then when you ask if they can't give a plausible explanation through the courts, you will seize the money for a particular period. Thereafter, after the investigation, they will confiscate forever. Now, in our country, in order to do that within the country, we need to have laws. Right. We don't have laws. Even if we have laws, merely having laws won't do. We need to know the technology. We need to know the expertise, how to recover. That is why the World Bank and UNODC, they have got together and started an initiative called STAR, that is Recovery of Assets. So we have to have a diplomatic channel with the UNODC. Then they will give the know-how, how to recover the money, even our monies have been sent abroad. So they will be basically coordinated. In addition to this particular initiative, in Swiss, there is a Center for International Asset Recovery. I think they have the best expertise in the world. We can contract them on our behalf. Of course, we have to pay a commission to them. Then they have the best experts in the world. So then they will take our case, they will negotiate with the other countries, and they do that.
Have you engaged with them before?
Of course, certainly. With the UNODC, we have held so much discussion, and the World Bank, and with the Center for Asset Recovery in Swiss. As a result of that, there was a presidential task force assigned to draft a law. After much deliberations, we have prepared the policy paper on asset recovery about 2.5 years back. It is with the legal draftman. It has never seen the light of the day, in addition to the anti-corruption law. So what we say is there has to be a political will. Without the political will, none of those laws will be introduced, number one. Even if the laws are introduced, that is not sufficient. You have to have a good international relationship with other international bodies. Then only they will help us to recover this money. So finally, what I would say is, it is a political will of the politicians of this country.
Interesting. Is there any way to bypass this process? I mean, can't we link the existing laws to, our relationship with other organizations? I'm just wondering, because I don't think the current parliament is going to pass any of these laws, and we cannot wait for future parliaments. I don't think the public will put up with that anymore. Is there any way to look at our existing laws and link them up with
Maybe to, while I agreeing with Mr. Jayamanne, just meanwhile, like you say, because we don't see this happening in the very near future, another option is where the asset destination. That country, they enforce their law against the people. Now we have diaspora, in most of these countries, and
quite a few lawyers there as well.
Yes, and a lot of interest these days, because of course Sri Lanka became hot news, and so this is one way, because nobody wants to say that in their country they are giving a safe haven to a person who has robbed this nation, and that they are enriching themselves, or through although the assets belong to the poor Sri Lankans who are now in this crisis. So that's one way, at least, because then some groundwork would be done. Because anyway, like Mr. Jayamanne said, even if we initiate this process through the diplomatic procedures, they will also have to go through the law enforcement for, to get the asset from this person. And even if it's to...
But I think that, just not to interrupt you, but just to add to what you said, I think Malaysia is a good example, where the US government right, went after those who robbed Malaysians via the 1MDB route, right? The Malaysian government itself, for whatever domestic compulsions, were not interested in prosecuting, Najib and the crowd, but the US government, through the powers that they had, went after and recovered those funds, and then gave them back to or offered them to Malaysia. So I think what you say is possible and has been done.
I think each jurisdiction has their own. Sometimes civil laws can be made use of.
Exactly.
But I think the most important thing is identifying those assets.
Yes.
One needs to know what are those assets.
Absolutely.
And that is, of course, public citizens, Sri Lankans can come out and say, well, I think this asset is owned by so and so.
Yes.
Look into it.
Yes.
So I think the biggest issue at the moment is,
Yes.
where are those assets?
Exactly.
What are those accounts?
Yes.
Where are those houses?
Yes.
So once that is established, then one needs to work whether it's a local jurisdiction.
Of course.
Or we can work within that particular jurisdiction. You might have even in civil law, even certain injunctions you might be able to get. Where once you start extracting the information, then of course, then the system works.
Yes. And also, I think there's a lot of, the journalists are doing a great job with this, right? There's a lot of the International Consortium for Investigating, they have been releasing a lot of information, right, in the public domain, which has been used. And then prosecutions in other countries. That's an example of Airbus, where the prosecution by I think the Serious Fraud Office in the UK, proved that officials at Sri Lankan Airlines had been taking bribes to facilitate purchases of their planes, and the evidence is given by by Airbus, for example, under sworn testimony in a foreign jurisdiction. It is a part of court records. So I think it's quite possible. So let's hope that we can work on that. But one thing I want to move on to is this where I see corruption happening a lot in terms of today under situations of what I would say public urgency or emergency. So it started off with COVID, where there was a massive fund that was collected from the public, no accountability for that. Right. Actually, it started well back in the time of the tsunami, I think, and then it continued under various. Each time there's a natural disaster, there seems to be some sort of scandal coming. And now, even with the purchase of fuel under emergency procedures, we don't even know some of the companies that they have been purchased for. How do we go about recovering this? Because the public is not really paying attention. All the public cares about is, do I have fuel? How much am I paying for it, and why is it so expensive? It's not. So I think this is going to be the norm in the coming years, because we are in a continuing emergency. How do we get accountability for this? Not necessarily historical corruption cases, but ongoing ones.
So these are the spot tenders. Basically, even the coal, electricity. I mean, whenever you are in short supply, then you have to urgently procure, and then you go outside the procurement process. Because of the urgency, sometimes it's not transparent. But one thing, Imran, is that those transactions are then recorded. So you can always check those. I mean, maybe in 3-4 days when something, say, petrol consignment is coming, there's a ship waiting in port, maybe it goes through.
Yes.
You can't check it through.
Yes.
But that has to the Auditor General. Now, the Auditor General also audits all these institutions. Qualifications come on accounts. Yes. The law enforcement must look at those and see, okay, well, the Auditor General has qualified this.
Exactly.
What has happened, and then go look into it. So that process doesn't, as far as I know, take place. It gets filed, it probably goes to Parliament, it gets recorded somewhere. So all that, when it's raised, when those issues, then it's a matter for the relevant, whether the Attorney General's Department, whether it's the police, the CID, we have FCID, all those, to look at those, pick those up, and then go through. So then the perpetrators know, well, I might get my commission today.
Right.
I might, buy this at a high price, get paid, but 6 months, 1 year, 5 years down the line, I am going to be brought to book. So as long as you have that fear brought in, then of course, unless you are extremely risky, taking risks, you won't do it.
Yeah, and I think the stress of society is also now coming upon people who are corrupt, right? And you can see that in the rapid turnover of heads of public institutions, because they can't take the heat. As simple as that. But Mr. Chairman, I want to come to you, and I think the thread that keeps weaving around this is around enforcement. Right, and ultimately we know that some of the institutions that even Rajeev mentioned were coming under the police department, right? And if you look at the surveys done by Transparency, the most corrupt institution in this country, perception of the most corrupt institution in this country is the police. So how do you, look at implementation?
No sooner I became the Director General of the Bribery Commission, I looked around. I found a country called Hong Kong. In the anti-corruption ranking, they are very up high in number 50. and they were close to us, no, Sri Lanka, an Asian country. I wrote to the chairman of the Anti-Corruption Commission saying, I'd be grateful if you can send a team of your expertise to Sri Lanka to train our investigators. He immediately wrote back, Mr. Jayamanne, thank you very much for invitation, but we have an issue with you. In your country, the investigators in the Bribery Commission, they belong to the police department. At any moment, they can be transferred out from the police department and they can be kicked out. So how can you say your commission is independent? Right. Come to Hong Kong and explain to me. Then I started a campaign and I went before the cabinet and got new postgraduates were recruited. 200 graduates were recruited. New posts were created. 10,000 applications came in. Then I went before the chairman of the Anti-Corruption Commission. Then they agreed to help us. So therefore, in other countries, those corruption investigations are not done by the police officers. They always corruption investigations are done by accountants, auditors, engineers. So likewise, we don't have a single accountant or the accountant or any other engineer in our Bribery Commission. For example, even in Bhutan, country like Bhutan, who is in the anti-corruption ranking number 25, the investigations are conducted by the engineers. So that is where, apart from the integrity of the investigators, they are not independent, I have to say. They are not independent because they belong to the police department. And even if we recruit someone from independently, we have to see we recruit the best resource persons. That is why there is the Colombo commentary prepared by the UNODC, Colombo commentary on Jakarta Declaration. It speaks of the independence and the efficiency of the anti-corruption agencies. They came to Sri Lanka and prepared that. There they say, if you want to have a successful anti-corruption body, you must always have the independence to recruit whoever you want, the commission wants. Right. You are not being guided by the Public Service Commission. And you decide what the salary that you give. Excellent. And you have the power to recruit anyone from the government department or private sector. So therefore what I say is, yes, we have to have independent investigators. Not only independence, we have to have quality investigators. For that, we must directly get funds from the parliament. We have to always now go and kneel down before the public servants, against whom we conduct investigation. We have to go before the treasury and ask for funds. They never give.
It makes no sense for them to give. Nadishani, I think you want to add something. Yeah. In terms of the enforcement.
Yes. Enforcement. Actually, I wanted to also add a quick point on the previous question. Something we put on. We also put out some recommendations, 15 points with regard to uplifting the country from an anti-corruption point of view. But one point there, a very simple thing which the government cannot say we are unable to do, is to have a open digital platform, publicly available. Anybody can log in and see, where you show what are the different funding, loans, grants, in kind, in money, whatever you are getting, and then who's giving how much and how you are spending. Now, COVID, they started the promise.lk and all of that, but then you will see some of the funds that came, but you cannot see how it's used. We had to demand all that, and in addition, in that same recommendation, but we said this, the Ministry of Finance, the central bank, they need to have very regular and frequent press conferences and tell the people these were the steps taken in these 2 weeks. This very clearly. And, we have to also empower the journalists and others to ask the proper questions.
Exactly. That's something I found as being because, a big problem.
Not they the sensationalizers, but actually proper questions to, hold them accountable. So this is a simple thing. But now why cannot they have a website? I think more people need to ask, because we see the pledges, and but we see that nothing has still gone to the ground in terms of relief, to the point that people are starving. So I think that's a simple thing. Absolutely. That we can ask.
Can RTI help in terms of getting access to information?
Very much so. You have RTI so wide, and if actually even those who are interested can start making those requests, it may take time, but the information comes. And you can keep asking. There is no limit. You ask one question, then you get an answer.
Exactly.
Build on that and ask again. Certainly.
Exactly. What I say is, Rajeev, you shouldn't wait till you make a request on RTI. We must amend our laws. Maybe one clause maybe in the constitution or somewhere, even under the whatever the law, saying every government department is legally bound to divulge all these transactions through their website. So then you don't need to make a request. So it's a simple amendment to maybe constitutional amendment or any amendment under any other law, saying all these above particular limit, we'll say maybe 50 million or above, all these transactions, how you have called the bids, how you have selected, to whom the bids were given, you must publish in your website. Like that, if you can do the change, that will be fine.
Very simple adjustment. I mean,
And
sovereignty is in the people.
Yes.
We should be able to see.
Absolutely. Well, one good thing I think is we were having another panel on the Data Protection Act, and I think the Data Protection Act has very specific provisions as to what sort of qualifications and or experienced people who are to be recruited for the Data Protection Authority should be there. Including, the requirement to be a board member, and then through the board member, the director general. So I think they've looked at it, and also they're looking at adding one aspect later on, which is the remuneration, right? That they are paid market rate. So I think at least on that front, there is movements. What you say, Mr. Jayamanne, is quite possible.
Even in our new anti-corruption law, we have put disqualification to become a member of the commission and DG, and we have put qualifications also. Likewise, we have studied other jurisdiction, and we have introduced. So far, it's with the legal draftsman, most latest.
Most things seem to be at the legal draftsman.
Not only that, this is the document. This is the National Action Plan we prepared for 5 years. This was launched on the 18th of March 2019, but they are not implementing. Every step is there for the prevention, enhance the values, then the prosecution, and everything is there, but they are not implemented.
Right. Rajeev, I want to come to you because I think something that we need to do, and I think we've tried to do that with the central bank governor, where we give there's institutional independence. Governor's supposed to have 6-year term. At least with this governor, I think there's a bit of hope that he will be independent, right? Where we want to create institutional independence so much so that at least the heads of the institutions will take decisions based on national interest, as opposed to personal interest. Even now, you see so many of these institutions. Their heads are political appointees who have absolutely no clue or domain expertise in what they are in, right? So then, how do we create that independence and make people? I mean, I think that's when we had the public service, which was before the 1970s, right, where we had permanent secretaries. I think at least this national, thinking of the national interests used to be there, and the corruption was a lot less.
There are issues on that. That is why we are all demanding that the 90th Amendment needs to be brought in. That strengthens the appointment of the Public Service Commission, and therefore independence, we say. Having said that, we had it before, we had the 17th before, and it is better than what we have now, but that won't be a panacea for all the problems. We need to, again, I think, look a little outside the box and see how we bring independence to all these institutions. One thing which we have not done since the 70s is worked on national planning. At the end of the day, you have these public officials who don't have real plan in place, a target, a benchmark to achieve. Then you have the politicians coming in the form of the ministers, and then they tell you do this and that, and you're going all over. The secretaries are appointed by the president. Now that would remain in the 90th Amendment, so that also brings a political dimension to it. However, a government also needs to have your people in the right places. So it's up to the executive to appoint the right people. If you appoint friends and family, then you're in trouble. If you have a framework of planning, in fact, we were having a discussion with the Minister of Justice, Dr. Vijay Rajapaksa. He also thinks this is important, and he was saying maybe it should be brought in by way of legislation. Have a plan for the country which can't be changed. Each government comes in. Cabinet.
And most
otherwise,
developed countries,
yes,
do that.
Have those in place. At least a direction. Say education policy. I don't think the educationists know where we are in 10 years, where we should be. Have it in place. Then the public servants know, well, this is where we have to go. The minister can come and tweak it here and there, but you can't. It's a national interest. So that is an interest. You can't expect each public servant to decide what the national interest will be. You will have different standards.
Absolutely.
But if you have a plan in place, then you can work backwards. Ministers who come in then also have benchmarks.
Absolutely.
If they don't achieve, then you can say, well, you have not achieved it. Now we have when someone comes, we always say, okay, we have 2-3 good ministers in every government. That's not how it should be. You have 30 ministers, you must have 29 of them who are excellent. And otherwise, they must not be re-elected, but they keep coming back.
And positions are given based on political compulsions, right?
Compulsion.
That changes.
So, of course, that
multiple finance
of course,
ministers.
even in the West, you have these problems.
Of course. But policies don't change.
Yeah, it can be like, I mean, you might have someone you prefer, but that person must be competent. Even the public service, I think, you spoke of pre-70s. When someone comes out of the university, for example, the public service is one of the first choices. Now, sadly, it is not the case. You might look for an opportunity in the private sector. You go
overseas.
Overseas now, which is now the last couple of months. The public service you look at if you want, some, proper tenure of service, sort of stable career, you want a pension. But I think previously, if a public servant's job, you go into this thing, was the first choice. So we need to bring it back and then so then the quality of people, the best in those classes must come out. At least 5-10% must be in the public service. So then you have the quality, they can stand up. They are not worried. They can say, well, I am chucking this job. I'm independent. I will go and find my job somewhere else. But as soon as you're stuck within the system, it's not. You can't blame them also. This is your job. The politicians can be very difficult sometimes. They can transfer you. You'll suddenly be in Colombo. Next day you'll be in Monragala.
Yes. And the moment you initiate investigation, then you're transferred.
Yes. And also the other problem is this government's changing 5 years at a time. You go through a process, they will reverse it in the next 5 years. Even investigations, corruption.
Absolutely, I think Mr. Ayman has a lot of experience.
You go after somebody. Not go after you prosecute. Then there's a change of regime. Then you change and start prosecuting someone else. You can't conclude it. 5 years comes, you change back.
And I think the officials know that, and they just drag the investigation so that they know that they are.
So we have to think out of the box. I mean, there is no other way. I mean, just going in the system. We are just going to just drag this further and further. So that way we must the capacity, the competence, bring in independence. Obviously, in as much as we can. But I think the answer is somewhere else.
Nadishani, one of the things, because it's coming back to elected representatives, the ability to make laws, the ability to decide on state institutions. So I think the problem for us is that from the moment, or even before they get elected, they're highly corrupt because campaigns cost so much money now, right? And this is a problem globally. This is not only a problem in Sri Lanka, but at least in globally, the other institutions work, right? The other pillars of society can constrain these politicians, but here it is the politicians who seem to be deciding everything. So how do we clean up our whole, election campaigning, the whole, getting elected, so that we can get, for example, gender diversity in our parliament, because and also professionals. I've spoken to professionals heading various associations. I want them to run, and the first thing that they come and tell me is that I can't afford it legally, so that they can't split by. So then you don't get the creme of the country running in parliament, right? How do we reform this whole system?
So it's high time that we have a good campaign finance regulated law in the country. Now the current election commission has informed that they are in the process, that they have a draft, and that this is one of the key reforms they want to bring in, and we really look forward to that, and we look forward to also see this version. Sometime back there was a draft. We've also put out our recommendations. So just like you said, it is like the start of this whole corruption sort of vicious cycle that goes around. So much so that because you need so much of money, because there is no limitation whatsoever now to how much a person can spend.
Absolutely.
So there is huge disparity, and like a person who's never been corrupt and say who
a professional
and cannot afford, and coupled with our electoral system, how are you even going to get people to know that you're with the kind of it's at the moment when there's so much power given to money in politics, it's all about who makes the loudest sound gets votes, which is completely wrong. No wonder we keep electing wrong people, right? So and like you say, to enable women and other more vulnerable people who do not come from, say, rich families or so to say, and also to take away this mindset from the MPs saying, okay, now if I need to contest next time, I need to start stealing now, because with this salary I'm not going to be able to fund the next campaign. So all of that. And it's critical that this regulating law that we brought brings curtails the inflow. So or to the inflow. So there has to be a limit of how much you can spend, so that it's level playing field. And then the spending. Right, you need to, that's more than curtailing the spending, plus the third one is interlinked to the other two, is the disclosure. Who is giving you money and how much? Because then that's where the whole vested interest comes, right? So you'll have, say, a major private company funding you in a mega way, and I mean, they're not doing it out of just love. They're going to expect some favors, and you are bound after that in a way. And then you need to say who is giving you and how much. Then you need to say for what are you spending. I mean, the general suspicion people have is you are buying votes, and I mean, we've had plenty of examples of this coming up. So you cannot, you need to say how, for what and what you're spending. You cannot be unfair in terms of getting media space, etc. And then, so you need to say how much you're spending. And fourthly, you have to, now there is this mechanism in certain countries where they just take away avenues for anybody else to fund, and the government funds.
Yes, Australia is a good example.
But at the moment for us, it might not be feasible. Because so for the moment we might need.
I think we can curtail the expenditure. I think that is what we need to focus on.
And disclose it. I mean, there is no disclosure now, not even the election commission knows. But with all of this, your same point on enforcement will come. Say we come up with this brilliant piece of legislation, but if most probably should be the election commission, it's a logical one to be the authority that has to be given that teeth to enforce this law. Now we have a bigger hurdle though. Now say we come up with this brilliant piece of legislation, who's going to pass it?
The same corrupt people who are
not just that, it's their interest in a way.
Of course.
So it's going to need a huge public demand, a public campaign to say that they cannot, like they will have to feel compelled to do it, because this is the voter base is saying, no, you need to pass this law.
I think it's possible because in Australia, this election, right, the lack of an independent central corruption commission was a main campaign plank of one of the parties, right? And they got into power, and now they will be held accountable on that. So I think there is public.
And the conversation has started, and we've got many inquiries saying, because now some of them say, let's think about the next election and do it right. And one thing they're talking about is campaign finance. It's awesome.
Excellent. It's an exciting, I think, heady times we're in, at least after many decades of inaction. We're looking at that. I think we're out of time, but we've had a fascinating chat. And on behalf of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom Sri Lanka Office and EconomyNext and HLN, our partners, I wish to place on appreciation the thanks to our three panelists, Mr. Sarath Jayamanne, Nadishani Perera, and my good friend Rajeev Amarasuriya as well. Thank you for tuning into this episode. And if you watch our series, Reshape Europe 2022, you will see where the different bits and pieces fit to create a better country. Right, and we have a roadmap in all of our interviews where I think the seeds for a better country are quite visible. And I hope you will join us on our next episode so that we can examine this topic further as well. Thank you very much.